Hello, everyone. We will get started in about a minute. We're just doing a little bit of final work here. Let's wait for more folks to join us. And I will be with you in a second here. I'm just having a little technical issue of getting the Zoom boxes back on. For some reason, they're not wanting to cooperate with me today. Oh, well. Let's see if I just stop share completely. I am also going to try to turn on closed captioning, and it doesn't going to work. That's the issue I'm having. Okay, sorry, I cannot turn on closed captioning. There is no raising of hands. We'll give you some directions in a minute. Okay, folks, let's get started. I'm Paz Artaza Regan, and I am Program Manager at Catholic Climate Covenant, and it's a pleasure to have you all join us today. Before we get completely started, I always like to let you know of some housekeeping details. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to anyone who registered within the next 24 to 48 hours. If you have questions, we ask that you submit them in the Q&A box. If you know who the question is for, please let me know which panelist, or you can say it's for both, or you don't have to say anything. I will sort of try to send it to the right person. For communications between each other or for technical questions, you can put that in the chat. I'm happy to tell you that my colleague Elena Gaona is here with us, and she will be helping me on the monitoring the chat box. Next, we always get started with prayer in our webinars. And for today, I have chosen from the rural prayer petitions of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, their Wisconsin Synod. It's one of their petitions for October, and it's on the harvest. So if you will join me and center yourself, remember that we are in God's presence at all times. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. For fields that are becoming empty, we give you thanks, O Lord. Where crops stood, now is harvested stubble. Where young stock grazed, pastures grow taller. Out of your faithful promise, O God, the land has produced, and grains are in the bins, and livestock have gone to markets. We give you thanks for providing food for all people. Bless those who continue to work the harvest. Keep them safe. Let them hear our thanks for their efforts. Amen. About a month ago, I reached out to Jim Ennis at Catholic Rural Life because of their excellent work to lifting up the issues that are affecting rural communities in the United States. I've been especially heartened by their work in a couple of conferences and other accompanying resources that they've had, addressing the most pressing challenges facing modern agriculture and from a faith-based perspective. And they really do lift the question that we are going to be addressing today. And that is mainly, how can religious beliefs guide us in the ethical production of abundant foods while caring for the environment and upholding the dignity of farmers and workers? I'm honored today that Jim, and one of the family farmers that he works with agreed to join us. As the Catholic Church begins to focus and engage more deeply in the Laudato Si action platform, we should focus on the enormously impactful economic sector. and specifically on the challenges and opportunities that face farmers, farm workers, and rural communities. As the COP27 starts meeting in Egypt later this week, I invite us as Catholics to focus on the issue of food production, its impact on creation, and how the Catholic community can respond so we can help build just and faithful agricultural and food systems. So joining us today is Jim Ennis. He is Executive Director of Catholic Rural Life, a national nonprofit dedicated to the vitality of rural communities in the United States since 1923. A little detail I learned how long they've been working at this. Jim's passion and vocation, and I use the word vocation because he will explain a little bit of that, is in affirming farmers in what is called the sacred sweaty work. When not guiding CRL, he tends to his quarter-acre lot, growing a garden and raising chickens. I find out these things, Jim. Ron Rossman operates Rossman Family Farms with his wife Maria and his sons outside of Harlan, Iowa. The farm is known for its diversification and organic agricultural practices. The picture that you see here is from the family at the Westphalia 150th anniversary celebration this past summer. And Ron and his wife Maria are seen on the left. And I'm going to say, Ron, you look rather different.
Yes.
So I am glad that both of you are here.
I hope I look younger.
I am stopping sharing my slides. And at this point, Jim, if you'd like to get us started.
Thank you, Paz. And it's a real pleasure to be here. And I just want to thank all of you for joining us on this particular presentation discussion. And I just want to go ahead and I want to thank Catholic Climate Covenant for their hosting of this important event. What I want to do is just a little background about Catholic Rural Life. We were founded in November 11th, 1923, almost 99 years ago. And our founder was a farmer. He grew up on a dairy farm in southeastern Minnesota, but then went on to Oregon, where he was ordained in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1905, but then became a priest and a pastor in rural communities in Oregon. And he advocated for social justice, but he also had a great concern for rural life. And he founded the organization for the purpose of focusing Catholic resources on rural communities, both farmers and farm families, but he had a profound heart for all those living in rural and raising food. Now, that's been 99 years ago, but our mission hasn't changed. We're still promoting Catholic life in rural America, but our vision is flourishing Catholic life in rural America, thriving families, farms, communities, centered on faith, community, and care of creation. And this is a picture down below you see here of Ron and his wife on their farm. And so this is an older picture of a younger Ron, but it was just Ron has taught me so much. I've visited his farm a few times and been able to learn so much from the Roseman family, and all that they do is beautiful. Our organization focuses on agriculture and food, rural ministry and outreach, and stewardship of creation, how faith informs that, and we develop leaders in rural communities. Just a little background on what's the problem. We today, we produce more food than ever before. Incredible advances in technology and models of heightened efficiency. Yet we've got a big problem. We've got fewer farmers, larger farms, a lot of topsoil depletion and groundwater contamination. From upstate New York to Central California. I was just in California 2 weeks ago, and there are all kinds of different water problems, but one of the water problems is the contamination of aquifers because too much nitrates. This happens in Iowa and Minnesota, all around the country. We're also seeing a lot of surface water pollution and an increase in air pollution in different parts of the country. So these are challenges, environmental challenges that farmers face every day. And it's an impact, the impact is exacerbated with the changing climate as well. Not only agricultural practices, but also the use of pesticides, and it impacts the water, it impacts the soil. And these are numbers here that are still relevant for today. How much is used in pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers in rural America for farming practices. The concern around the world is, though, a loss of biodiversity and loss of forests, woodlands, and a lot of it is due to agricultural practices. So this is a global challenge, not only in the US, but across the world. And so these are issues that we as Catholics have to be concerned with. And I've spoken to the Secretary of State's office at the Vatican, and we've talked, I brought farmers in 3 years ago to talk to the Secretary of State's office about the concerns that are occurring all around the world in terms of loss of biodiversity. Fresh drinking water is an issue both in the United States, but also across the world. And water is going to be a significant issue going forward as well. In many places, the demand for fresh water exceeds the sustainable supply. Even in the San Joaquin Valley in California, we see the contamination of drinking water in those aquifers can have a big impact on communities. So it's both in the United States, but also around the country. Now, these bring up a whole bunch of questions. And Paz, you mentioned a couple questions in your promotional materials, but food sustains life. It's important. It's, no farms, no food. So we need farmers. We need agricultural practices that can sustain the earth. So this is a moral question and an important one for all of us to talk about. So I just, again, wanted to set the stage for why eating is a moral act. And even the most of the folks on this call may be eaters and not farmers, that they also have a role to play to think about the question about how we ensure farm workers and owners of farms in the United States and around work with dignity, and how can we protect the land, water, and other elements of God's creation while growing food for both our communities and for the broader world community. This is a great quote from Wendell Berry. He goes, "The soil is the great connector of lives, the source and destination of all. It is the healer and restorer and resurrector by which disease passes into health, age, into youth, death, into life. Without proper care for it, we won't have our community, because without proper care for it, we have no life." So this is really important, how we care for God's creation, especially soil, which is the foundation of agriculture. Now, the Catholic Church has a lot of social doctrine and has social teachings. And Pope Francis wrote a groundbreaking letter to us called Laudato Si in 2015. And it has been a godsend, because he's really articulated how the church's teachings over the centuries, but especially now in the 20th century, needs to address our practices, both in agriculture and also our other types of consumer practices that impact creation, impact the environment. And so he said this should be added to the Catholic social doctrine of the church. And these principles are key principles. The last one there, respect for creation, is a key principle the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has articulated over and over again. I just want to go through just a real quick overview of Pope John Paul II spoke to the largest outdoor audience in Iowa's history on October 4th of 1979, speaking to farmers. He said, "The land is God's gift entrusted to people from the very beginning." The second ancient call back with Adam and Eve was to till and to tend, to care and to cultivate the land. How do we care for it? We need to cultivate it to grow food, but we also need to care for it. And he said 3 key attitudes farmers should need to remind themselves: gratitude for and praise to God for the gift of the earth, that the earth is gift. Conservation responsibility, farmers must care for and conserve the land for future generations. And generosity, that God destined the earth and all contains for all of us on this planet. And that we need to make sure that all are food secure and not food insecure. Now, this is just a highlight from Pope Benedict. He also spoke on care of creation and on looking at agriculture, and not in a nostalgic sense, but as an indispensable resource for the future. He had a vision for agriculture, how to do this well. So Laudato Si came out in 2015 and talked about water, soil, and air pollution and these unsustainable practices. So this is a, he also talked about an ecological conversion. And this is the part that I want to emphasize. He said, a great cultural, spiritual, educational challenge stands before us, and it will demand that we set out on a long path of renewal. And he quoted Pope Benedict in this last bullet. The external deserts are growing because the internal deserts have become so vast. For this reason, ecological crisis is a summons to a profound need for conversion. Now, Catholic Rural Life, in the last 6 years, we developed a document working with farmers across the country, working with the Vatican, to develop a document called the Vocation of the Agricultural Leader. Vocation is a calling. And this is an important message to all young men and women, especially, that agriculture, farming is a vocation too. Farmers hold this crucial place in society, a unique role to provide food for our communities. And we need to honor and recognize the importance of farmers and all those involved, the farm workers, all those involved in agricultural production, agricultural research. And this is a vocation that God has given to many who love the land and want to grow food and provide it for others. But also there's a huge responsibility to be protectors, to be stewards of the land and creatures. And this is what the church has taught. Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict, Pope Francis have all talked about this important vocation and how to strike a balance between sufficient yields without undermining the environment. So we've been having conferences all over the world through the International Catholic Rural Association, as well as Catholic Rural Life in the United States, about this calling. And we've supported, Ron has been to both of our agricultural leadership conferences. One was called the Vocation of the Agricultural Leader. The other is a Noble Vocation, Faith, Food, and the Environment. But food and agriculture are inextricably linked, and the increasing concentration at every level of agriculture and the growing globalization mean that fewer people are making decisions that affect far more people, land than any time in history. And because of this corrupting influence of injustice, that is of sin, the church cannot remain indifferent to these social matters. So the Catholic Church has much to say and to share. I've shared this with farmers all over the country. One time in Stockton, California, in the San Joaquin Valley, I had a group of farmers come up after sharing these presentations on this noble vocation. They came up to me, and one of the farmers poked me in the chest and said, "You got to share this around the country." She goes, "We don't hear this. We're Catholic farmers, and we don't hear this in the pulpit." So this is a really key issue among us and those involved in the laity who are working throughout the country, those women, men and women, religious and clergy, to continue to articulate this vision of how to grow food in sustainable ways. I know hundreds of farmers that are doing wonderful work, like Ron. He's going to share here in just a second about the regenerative agriculture, organic agriculture, sustainable agriculture, how we can grow food and grow it sustainably. And there are ways, even larger farms can do this, but they have to think differently. They have to think more into the way the church sees land as gift, how we care for it. Now, many farmers have this natural instinct, but a lot of them aren't necessarily informed. Just to give you one statistic, of the 244 Catholic degree institutions across the country, there's not one Catholic school of agriculture. If you want to be a nurse, you can study at a Catholic university and study nursing, or medicine, or doctor, or a lawyer, or a business person. Or if you want to be a teacher, you can go to Catholic schools and be informed by Catholic social doctrine. But there's no school of agriculture at a Catholic university across the US. Something's wrong with that picture. And that's why we, again, need a sense of what the church has to say and how we can be informed by our faith, by our love for Christ and his gift of the earth, but also what the church has to say about how we share these resources, how we care for the land. So I want to pass it on to Ron, because Ron is a practitioner. He has his fingers in the soil, and he knows his land very well. So thank you for the opportunity. And Ron, thank you for being such a great model, you and your family, and as well, thank you for just the many ways you've helped shape my thinking about our agriculture.
Thank you, Jim. I'd like to start out by saying I was previously a board member of Catholic Rural Life from 2009 to 2015. So I really enjoyed my time, and certainly on that board, and certainly getting to know Jim. A little bit more about myself. Been farming it'll be 50 years now, starting this next year in 2023. My wife, Maria, and I have been married for 44 years. We have 3 sons. 2 of them are farming with us now. One started in 2007 and the other in 2014. And then our youngest son works for the Foreign Agricultural Service in New Delhi, India, at the present. Our farm consists fairly large for certified organic, 700 acres, very diversified, crops and livestock. We are traditional in the sense we grow corn and soybeans like everybody else does here in the Midwest. But then we grow a lot of other more diverse crops, such as small grains like oats and barley and hybrid rye. And then we have hay and pasture because we have a stock cow herd of 100 cows. We have 40 sows, and we also have 250 egg layers. And we not only produce food, but we market it under our own labels. Maria does the marketing of the beef and pork and eggs and popcorn. We do that too for over 20 years now, simply called Roseman Family Farms. And then one of our sons has a restaurant in Harlan now called Milk and Honey. And that's been going for about 6 or 7 years now. And of course, it's all local foods, some our own and some other growers. It's getting really a good reputation. And then my wife has a store on the farm called Farm Sweet Farm. And then our daughter-in-law, one of our daughter-in-laws, also has a food hub, which she operates, which buys food from local growers and distributes it all over Iowa and Nebraska. So that's what we do. Now I want to set the stage a little bit and talk a little bit more about Laudato Si as well. And I actually wrote this down early this morning when I got up, and I just want to read it because I want to get it right, but I feel very strongly about Laudato Si. First of all, I would like to say that Laudato Si is one of the most important encyclicals that the church has ever written. This is because it puts forth, really for the first time, the union of human, social, and ecological justice. The church has done quite well over the years in the promotion and addressing of human social justice, but not until recently has the subject of how we care for God's creation even been considered. And that is because we have, until our lifetimes really, taken our natural resources of this planet for granted, that we would always have enough of everything. But we are finding out now through science as far as what's happening to our climate, that's not true necessarily. So how we treat and view nature and the food we eat and how we view and treat our neighbor, to me, says a lot, if not everything, about how we view and treat God. This God didn't, God created everything. God's creation, human beings, all of life, we have to view it as sacred. So having said that, I want to look a little bit at what we're going to face in the years ahead. I should mention my current job assignment, or as far as being involved outside the farm, I'm on the climate change subcommittee of the National Sustainable Agricultural Coalition based in Washington, D.C. So the earth has warmed a little over 2 degrees over the last century. And by 2050, it's estimated that it's going to add another 0.7, or a total of 2.7 degrees. And by 2100, some estimates are that it's going to be 3 to 5 degrees or worse. And the people that have studied these things are saying that if we warm to about 3.5 degrees, which I'm afraid is probably most likely going to happen unless we really take dire action, this person says there will be endless suffering. So, we've had decades of inaction and denial that the earth is warming due to the carbon dioxide that we are putting into it, mostly from our vehicles that we drive. But agriculture is kind of the sleeping giant here. It contributes way more than all of us realize. It's really funny. The official estimate, when you look it up, says 11.2% of CO2 greenhouse gases comes from agriculture. But that's very misleading because it doesn't take into account the production of fertilizers and chemicals and all the things that we use. It just factors in what the farmers are doing with what has been, their inputs of seeds and chemicals and fertilizers and everything that goes into farming. So the World Bank, for instance, estimates it at 19 to 29%. But I've seen it even as high as 40% of greenhouse gases coming from agriculture. Of course, when we first started hearing about climate change, we heard about mitigating the effects, didn't we? We're going to work on, lessening it. But instead, now we seem to just say, well, we will adapt. And to me, that has been the attitude and philosophy of, I guess I want to call it corporate, big ag, and big food. Two entities, big ag meaning the production side, big food meaning the distribution and processing side. They just want to tweak these systems. They don't want to see the massive changes we need because of self-interest, whether it's the fertilizer business, the chemical companies, or Nestle, or Unilever, or whatever corporate food entities we have. So, uh, when we look at food, at least a third of the food we produce is lost from spoilage or harvest loss around the world, or it's thrown out, it's wasted. So there's that. That's about 1/3. And then there's the fact that in this country, we are not growing as much food as we used to, because in Iowa alone, 55% of our corn is going to ethanol. Yes, it's keeping the fuel prices down a little bit, isn't it? That's why everybody thinks it's great. But I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit. Now, nationwide, about 45% of our corn goes into fuel versus food. So there's that to think about. Now, on the corn side, the latest studies, this was like a 8-year study out of the University of Wisconsin. It showed that corn ethanol made into ethanol was actually putting in 24% more CO2 than regular gasoline, because when the farmers take land that was in grass or conservation reserve or in forests, whatever, those practices, just in taking that land and releasing the CO2 by stirring the soil up, because that's how you release CO2, by taking by the decomposition of organic matter. That's how it works. It's just simple science there of photosynthesis and respiration. And I'm thankful for my degree in biology from Iowa State. I still try to use it all the time because it does give you a good foundation. But so anyway, there's so much competition for food versus fuel. That's a big issue. And I'm of the belief that, as time goes on, ethanol will lessen in its usage. At least that's what I hear Secretary Tom Vilsack say, Secretary of Agriculture. I just recently had a meeting with him 2 Saturdays ago when he was talking about this. But anyway, so I want to talk about the areas of agriculture where we can do something about it. And I'll talk about what we did on our own farm. Okay, fertilizers and pesticides. Nitrogen, the production of it in anhydrous ammonia, creates nitrous oxide. It is 200 times more powerful a greenhouse gas than CO2. We haven't put any anhydrous ammonia on since 1982. And how we get our nitrogen is from the crop rotations of legumes like peas and alfalfa, and the crop rotations of different clovers. And then we also get it from our animal manure, and which we compost, by the way, which means you turn it and heat it up. And that reduces the methane, which is another powerful greenhouse gas. So we've been able to limit almost entirely our purchased fertilizers, yet our yields are right at the county average, which is phenomenal, because we are doing it through livestock and crop rotations and diversity. Like Jim said, the diversity is so important. We got to figure out how farmers can grow something besides corn and beans. We really do. And I've been promoting an idea on that. It's called hybrid rye. It is a third crop. We know we're familiar with rye bread. Rye, you can plant it in the fall, and then you can harvest it in the spring. And I'm working with groups that are trying to get the hog confinement industry, which, you know, we do not raise animals in confinement. We raise them outdoors. But anyway, we are stuck with, at this point in time, with the vast majority of all pigs and milk and eggs all come from confinements. So if we could get them to just even start buying this grain, that would give farmers the ability to plant a crop in the fall that would keep the ground covered, would sequester some carbon throughout the winter, you know, decrease CO2. And then you could also use the straw down the road. If you got away from the liquid manure systems, you could compost the manure, and it would be win-win all the way around. But we're trying to get some of the large hog confinements interested in this, which we have been able to do. We're working on it. It's an ongoing thing. But that could have a real effect on conventional agriculture. I don't know, how am I doing for time? Getting close, I'll bet, right?
You have about another 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I guess when we look at the big picture of all this, what I would propose very strongly is that we figure out how to get more local and regional food systems going in this country, where the food is locally produced and is not transporting all over the country and all over the world. It would address climate change. We would have healthier food because, you know, the food that is locally produced, you guys know about farmers markets and so on and so forth. You know, that food is a lot different than what you are buying just for convenience. You know, highly processed, convenient food that is really not healthy for us. We know that it's not healthy for us. And it is, yes, it's supposedly cheap, but it's not cheap in terms of the energy use and what's in it in terms of our health. So we got to support local food systems. And we could have, you know, it's obvious we could have more farmers on the land if we did that. And we could get some vitality back into our rural communities. The way it is now, the way we are going, I don't know how many of us are going to be able to farm in fairly large ways like us on 700 acres. I'll give you an example. A new combine today costs $500,000 to $1 million. You know, we just bought a used combine here this summer and paid $55,000 for it. That's still a lot of money, but that's what we're up against. And they don't make small combines anymore because, you know, corporate America and corporate ag always says bigger is better. And it's just simply not true if you factor in energy and climate. So and another, such an important thing as Christians and Catholics is that the phrase, we have to live simply so that other people can simply live. We have to take that to heart. The consumption that, you know, we have to have this, we have to have all that. We can't do that in this world anymore. Or we, you know, we're going to have enough endless, quotes, endless suffering due to the heat killing people, the climate migration due to the people having to move out of all the areas of the world where it's along the coastlines. And you know, if there's hope, any hope for us, we have to recycle everything, not just 5% here. That's what the latest figure is. We recycle 5% only of our plastics and so forth. So I'll close with that. I guess I'll just say in closing that I feel very closely a communion. That's what I always call it, the communion between the land, ourselves as farmers, God and nature, and all God's creatures. Dignity. We have to treat each other and all life with dignity. So thank you.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Jim. I think that you have set us up here for a rich conversation that will come from the questions. And Jim, thank you for replying to some of them. I may be repeating them so we can have them out in the open and answer them for everybody. I'm going to start with Ron. Ron, it's a two-parter question. One is, have you already seen the impacts of climate change in your farm? And what would those be? And when did you see them? And if there were some misconceptions, myths that you have encountered about what organic farming is and how dispelling some of those myths.
Okay. First of all, I started seeing the climate impacts really in the 80s already. That's when the weather extremes started to express themselves. And then one of the biggest things we see now is extended growing seasons. It's warmer in the fall. We don't have killing frosts as early. And then we hardly get, most winters, we haven't had hardly any snow. And it's warmer at nights. We have, we don't, how can I say this? We deal with pests by having an integrated system, whether it's diseases or bugs or and so forth. Because we have so much good wildlife and good bugs and habitat and plant trees and everything, we have a really good, we have a lot of predators like hawks and owls, etc. We've never lost a crop to anything like that. But I've noticed in our cattle that right now, pink eye is a problem. And pink eye never used to be a problem in October, November, December, because it would be cold. But now it starts expressing itself in these months. And then you have immunity. That's a huge issue in the conventional pesticide world of farmers are getting weeds again, and they don't know what to do about it because the pesticides are resistant to weeds, or the weeds have become resistant to the pesticide. Secondly, misconception, certainly yields. We have 60 bushel soybeans, which is phenomenal, as good as anybody in our neighborhood. the costs. If you have locally produced food that stays local and doesn't go through, you know, the organic supermarkets, which is really, you know, the same mentality, unfortunately, as conventional supermarkets, you know, that's where the costs are added on. Our meat, for instance, is cheaper than what you can purchase at our local Hy-Vee in Harlan, a town of 5,000. So, and then also if you buy raw ingredients as a consumer, the vegetables and so forth, and cook, you know, take time to enjoy your food and enjoy cooking, and don't buy processed, highly packaged and highly processed organic foods. That would be a couple of ideas.
Thank you. And now I'm going to have some question for Jim. Jim, and I know you answered this one by writing the answer, but I think everybody would love to hear the answer that you wrote. And it has to do with how have farmers heard this message that you take to them? Have you noticed and this is going to be my question, have you noticed a receptivity to it? Are Catholic farmers receptive to the Laudato Si message? How have you seen that play out?
I've seen it play out in many different ways, and let me just explain. So the presentation in Stockton, we had about 100 people and about 50 or 55 farmers from all over Central California. When we shared a presentation called Another Way of Seeing, and seeing creation in the way that the church teaches, and our Christian responsibility to care for it, and especially farmers and their noble vocation, those farmers came to me and they go, we've never heard this. This is so good. We are amazed. And it's convicting, but it's also challenging, and it's affirming because of who we are as farmers. So their response was, they were somewhat convicted, but they were also affirmed. So they said, you got to share this all around the country. And I said, we're working on that. And that was the seed of the Vocation of the Agricultural Leader, which is an international document. On the other hand, I did a presentation called Laudato Si in the Countryside in Kansas 1 year. And we had about 75 people there. And there were a lot of folks that had their arms crossed, trying to listen. They were really suspicious of Pope Francis's message, his letter. Unfortunately, their politics and certain bloggers were just dismissing that the Pope had anything to say about agriculture, had no expertise in biology, for instance, or in, this is just the things they were saying. But if they would just, open their arms and listen, open their ears and listen. Many of them afterwards said, I came here very skeptical, but after hearing the presentation, actually, I'm more heartened now to listen. And so I do see conversion happening. Pope Francis' letter, though, has really opened the doors, especially to clergy, because now the clergy have a church document as a Catholic social doctrine of the church that this is really critical. And because I also met many clergymen who were in rural that were also closed to this message. So this is really groundbreaking. There's still a lot of work to do around sharing education-wise about Laudato Si and how it applies in rural communities. But there has been resistance too, many debunking it, and but I'm seeing more and more openness to it, thankfully. But some of it is because of the problems Ron's mentioned. So it's been a mixed reception.
Thank you. Ron, I've got a question that's both for you and Jim, and it came from two different people in different ways. One person was talking about a bioenergy factory that was coming into their community. And then the next question had to do with bioethanol and the issues that diverting food into energy. Can you elaborate a little bit about how that issue impacts food production
Sure.
and the environment.
If I could go first, Jim. I listened to Secretary Vilsack talk about the need for waste and cellulosic being used, wastes of all kinds, being used to produce biofuels, not grains like corn. He didn't really say that very loudly because, yes, in his position, the commodity groups have so much influence, as we know, the corn and soy, the meat industry. The lobbying power is one reason why regenerative agriculture has always had an uphill fight, because we're smaller farmers and much more rural community minded, and so on and so forth. And the farmers will say, well, we're just producing for the market. Yeah, there's a tremendous market for corn and soybeans. That's because they have been created. But we have to have, Natural Resource Conservation Service and USDA, I think they are improving. There's $90 billion now being allocated to more sustainable approaches to growing food. That's a big chunk of money, but now we got to be so careful to make sure it gets spent wisely and really does the kinds of things that we are talking about. And that's where it's so important to have representation from groups like the ones that I belong to. And I was just quickly going to say, what gives me hope are young farmers. I helped start the group Practical Farmers of Iowa in 1986. Today we have 5,400 members, and the majority of our members are young, beginning and want to be farmers. That's encouraging because they see things differently than large scale corporate types.
Jim, do you have anything to add there?
Well, I think on that particular question, the question was also asking, what can I do and would protests help? And I think hearing from the community is really important. I mean, letter writing campaigns, in-person type of protests to express the concerns around the care for the environment, whether it's water pollution, soil pollution, those are really important. And when there's a critical mass of consumers and community members there, that sends a message, and those corporate managers will at least be attentive to it, and God willing, pay attention and make some changes or adaptations. But it's really important, our role as citizens to speak, to articulate these issues, these concerns in ways, especially within if you have other community members who can participate.
I would like to say, I saw that somebody mentioned you got to say something about water, and I do. Water, the lack of water is starting to really show itself here the last 2 years for the first time since the 1930s here where I live. And I am really concerned about that. But that's where our farm is more resilient to climate change than conventional ag. That's because we have better water holding capacity in our soils. You have to talk about soil quality. That's what happens when you practice regenerative farming methods. You increase your soil quality, meaning you add organic matter, you have better structure, you have better water holding capacity, you enhance the life of the soil when you don't use pesticides. and fertilizers, commercial fertilizers. You got the microbes and the mycorrhizae fungi and all of that working for you. That's documented. Science continues to document that. So, but still I am concerned about water. One of the things we did was we built a farm pond to meet some of our needs for watering cattle, but also to provide a habitat for wildlife. But also we have to maybe think, you know, all the farmers here in the Midwest always want to drain all their water away so they can farm. Well, maybe we need to think about, let's stop draining all this water and start building dams and reservoirs out here in the Midwest where that would have been unheard of. But it depends. Science is not figured out, and it's going to be hard to figure out, you know, these extremes. We might get 10-inch rainfalls too, and then it blows your thinking right out of the water, so to speak. So what do? You know, you have to be prepared for everything in the future here, much better prepared.
Thank you. We've got 4 minutes, so I'm going to frame this question kind of bringing in a lot of things, and it's going to be hard maybe to answer it, maybe in little snippets. What can Catholics, both rural Catholics and urban Catholics, do to help this issue? But beyond just, I want to open it up. How do we help organic regenerative agriculture? But how do we help the continuation of rural communities, healthy, vibrant rural communities with small family farmers that can stay in their land, young people that can go and become new farmers? So how can those of us watching this webinar, reading about this, really connect? And Jim, before we go, if you want to put in the chat the link to the document for the vocation, I will also share it tomorrow in the follow-up email, but I thought people might be interested in that. Now you can answer the question. Thank you.
Well, I was thinking about an act that's been introduced 2 years now called the Agricultural Resiliency Act by Representative Pingree out of Maine. She is actually an organic farmer, but she's fairly influential House Agricultural Committee member. But one of the problems is there's, I don't want to sound political, but you have to be, I guess. There's no Republican member of the House or Senate that has been willing to act as a co-sponsor. So I would suggest contacting your legislator and telling, please consider this, because all the things that I've talked about today and more, so much more detail about rewarding farmers for doing good regenerative practices, for doing the right thing, for being stewards, are in this bill, you know, and it puts the emphasis on our kind of farming methods. And maybe I should say one other thing that maybe some people would say, well, what's that got to do with it? But it was meant, you know, I'm not out here promoting that we all eat meat every day and so forth. Just because we sell beef and pork, that doesn't mean, you know, we also believe strongly that you should eat healthy. And to me, that does mean eating the appropriate amounts of meat, which are too high in this country. But let me just say that in terms of the climate, there's only 2 systems based on 30 years of research, 2 farming systems that actually can sequester carbon, meaningful carbon. And one is leaving the land in prairie. The other is using rotational grazing and doing a good job of grazing your cattle or goats or sheep. Now that is a pretty powerful statement there. And that says that, no, we should not get rid of all the livestock. We should get them out of the CAFOs, the confinements, yes. And not, we wouldn't have to have, you know, Iowa has 23 million hogs for crying out loud and 40 million chickens. You know, we don't need that many. We just need to get them spread out where it's healthier for the land and healthier for the animals and healthier for us. It's just common sense.
Thank you. And we are over time. So Jim, really quick.
Well, I think being involved in the farmers markets, supporting your local farmers markets, supporting community supported agriculture, asking your grocery stores to carry local foods that are grown locally, ask them about apples or fruits and vegetables. Congregations support agriculture. You know, if your church, your parish has land, you know, is consider growing some food on it and sharing that at a local food shelf. There are all kinds of ways, even growing your own vegetables, raising your own chickens. You know, these are things that you and teach your children, because the more connected we are to the land, the greater awareness we have of how we care for it. But supporting your farmers and as Ron said, public policies are really important. Farm bill, other public policies. We have information on our website. There'll be more information coming out. But that's important as a role, because those tax dollars, your tax dollars, go to support some of these programs.
Thank you. And I'm going to just close us out. And unfortunately, we're in this section here. For folks that need more information, I have here the emails, the websites that you can use. I will include them in tomorrow's follow-up. I'm going to add one thing that we should do, and that is pray for family farmers. They really do need our prayers these days, and farm workers, anybody who's working in the land. And finally, I want to thank Ron and Jim for taking the time. Jim, thank you. Ron, a special thanks for you, because I know you took time from harvesting your corn. So I will let you go back to that. Thank you, and God bless everybody.
Thank you so much. God bless you all.